Hello everyone. Today in this video we'll discuss the political systems in South Asia. But before that, let's look at the names of the countries which are there in South Asia. South Asia is an important region full of natural resources and diversities. And there are 7 countries in this region. The countries are Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Maldives, and India. There are 2 more countries about which or which were included in this in SARC, South Asian Regional Cooperation, as it was called, SARC, and they are Afghanistan and Myanmar. So today we'll focus on these 7 countries only and the way the political systems in these countries evolved. When we talk about political systems, we know that generally it was democracy which came in the mid 20th century. Before that, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, even Maldives, they were colonies, they were the British colonies. And around mid 20th century only they got the independence, most of them. And of course we also know that there is no communist form of government in any of these countries. So it was from monarchy in some countries, of course in Maldives it was monarchy, but from colony in other countries to democracy, that was the change. And we'll discuss about other countries also. So let's come to Bhutan first. Bhutan had a monarchy till 2007, but the king started working to change the system from monarchy to democracy, and there was a lot of study of different constitutions and different political systems in the world, and finally a constitutional monarchy was established in 2008. According to this, king is the head of the state, and the executive powers are vested in the PM and the cabinet. And their legislature is the parliament, and they also have a judiciary. So all the 3 organs of the state. And another important thing about this is that there was an agreement in 1949 under the guidance of the British government between India and Bhutan, according to which India was not supposed to interfere in the internal affairs of Bhutan, but it was supposed to guide Bhutan for its external affairs. And to tell you a little more about it, the geography, that Bhutan has its boundary with China on the one side and India on the other side. It lies on the northeast of India. So, and of course Nepal is close, but it's not having its border with Nepal, and Bangladesh also. Both the countries are closer, a few miles away from Bhutan. So that is about Bhutan. We'll go to the next country, and the next country is Nepal. Nepal is again, like Bhutan, is a Himalayan kingdom, and it has its boundary in the north with China, and then from all other sides like east, west and south, it has its boundary with India. Nepal's political system was monarchy until 1951, but we all know since the mid of 20th century there was a change in the air, and democracy had started being established. It was being established in many of the countries, and accordingly even Nepal was influenced. There were movements, and finally the monarch decided to have established democracy in 1951. BP Koirala was the first prime minister. But then it was there only for 10 years, about 10 years. It was suspended again by the king, and Koirala was arrested. But further, after that, again, King did introduce a democratic system, but it was only in the name, in the sense that it was the monarch with the help of the army that actually ruled the state. And the king's words used to be the law. I had stayed in Nepal for 2 3 years. I was a lecturer in a city in Nepal, that is Biratnagar. So I have the experience of that also. After that, there were civil liberty movements in Nepal in 1990s, and then beyond that again, and finally Nepal became a republic in 2008, and the king had to hand over the power to the elected representatives. But the constitution was not made even then, and it took quite a few years to introduce its constitution that was established, that was introduced in 2015 after a gap of 7 years. Of course, there have been some controversies also associated with the new constitution regarding the minority rights or regarding the rights of the women. So that is about Nepal. So we'll go to the next country, and that is Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka was Ceylon, it became a republic. Ceylon became a republic in 1948. And since then, it was working on its system of establishing a democracy. So in 1956, the new system was introduced, and in which they decided to have Sinhalese as the Sinhala as the only language in the country. But that led to resistance by the minority groups. They felt their culture is being threatened. In the meantime, Ceylon became Sri Lanka in 1972. But as we know, this dominance of one culture, one language led to a conflict between the Sinhalese and the Tamil minorities, and that continued in the 80s and the 90s, even in the first few years in the new centuries, in up to 2007, I believe. And finally, the movement was crushed, and in fact, it was a movement that had taken the shape of terrorism also by the LTTE, as it was called. But anyways, so this is the story of Sri Lanka. It has the semi-presidential form of government. Now Pakistan got freedom in 1947, like India, and it got freedom on the basis of religious identity. The aim of the founders of Pakistan was to protect the rights of the Muslims. So that was its identity, and but soon after it got independence, the founder of Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, he gave a speech in the parliament, and by which he declared that it is not going to be a religious state, it is going to be a secular state, and that was in August 1947 itself. And that speech is reflective of how he wanted to protect the rights of all. He wanted to give equal rights to everybody, but that was not to be. And in 1956, when the constitution was formed, it was declared as an Islamic state. And even democracy didn't remain for many years, because just after 2 years, there was a coup, and an army general took over the state, General Ayub Khan. And then the army rule remained, the military rule remained from 58 to 1971, when there was a war and Pakistan was divided. And East Pakistan became a new country. But on the other hand, in Pakistan, democracy was established because the military ruler handed over the power to the elected representatives. So 71 onwards, there was democracy, but then again in 77, a coup was there in which General Ziaul Haq took over the reins of the state, and he ruled with a firm hand, crushing the the rights of the people. Finally, in 1988, when he died, the change took place. So again, it was followed by a democratic setup of between two parties, and then again after some years, Nawaz Sharif was the prime minister, and he was his the power was taken by a general from the army, and so there was a military rule, which was again followed by democracy. Right now we have democracy. Imran Khan is the prime minister of Pakistan. So it has not been a stable democracy in Pakistan. Uh, Democracy, then military rule, then democracy, and something like that. So we'll come to the next country, and that is Bangladesh. Bangladesh, as we have discussed the story of the history of Pakistan, Bangladesh was a part of Pakistan from 1947 to 1971, and it became independent from Pakistan because right from the beginning, when Pakistan was made, the people in Bangladesh, they felt that they were receiving unfair treatment. Urdu was being imposed, and they felt their own identity, their own culture of Bengali culture, Bengali language, they were being threatened. So in 1970, so resistance was there, movement was already there. In 1970, when Awami League, led by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, won a landslide victory, he was not given the power by the military ruler at that time, who was Yahya Khan. And so there was a mass movement, and there was support from India, and finally Bangladesh became free in 1971. And Sheikh Mujibur Rahman became the prime minister. But in 1975, there was a coup, and Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was assassinated. And then again, the rule was that of the military from 75 to 1990. And of course, there were resistance, there were movements against that. So finally, in 1990, around 1990, a representative democracy was established. And since then, it is having a democracy. So we'll go to Maldives. Maldives was a sultanate before 1968. And it became a republic in 68. And it adopted the presidential form of government. Political stability was not there from 68 to 78 for 10 years. But after Abdul Gayoom took over, there was a stable government for 30 years in Maldives. In 2005, it changed to parliamentary form, and there were protests, because there were protests since 2004. And a new constitution was adopted in 2008, and a prime minister was elected. But only after a few years, again, there was instability, and the prime minister, who was, I think, Nasheed or something, I don't exactly remember the name, he was arrested. So it is still having flip-flops as far as the political system is concerned in Maldives. And now coming back to India, we know India became independent in 1947, a new republic, and a new constitution was adopted in 1950. We also know it was a multi-party democracy, but it had a one-party dominance until 1967. After that, things started changing, other parties started emerging. And the coalition era started since the 1990s, and even in the first, even in 2000 onwards, the coalition governments were there. Even now, coalition government also only there, but the party is different, and there are other changes which are taking place. So I'll not speak more about that. So I would wind it up right now here only. We have seen there are 7 countries in South Asia and we have discussed about the political systems and the way these systems evolved in this region of South Asia.